January 2022, I was involved in a aggravated robbery. Basically, someone trying to rob myself and my partner with a firearm. During this time, I was working with an armored car company in San Antonio. I'd been with them for several years at this point. Due to a call-in, I found myself on a truck. Now, first time ever riding with this particular partner of mine. It's a little bit of a thing in the industry. You talk with your partner, you discuss what your expectations are in the event things are going bad. When do you just raise awareness, and when is a gun necessary? And there are certain things you agree on to do there. During this particular event, we stopped at an ATM early on a Saturday morning, and two individuals began walking up behind the vehicle. I'm very new to this environment. I've only been there for about 2-3 weeks. I don't know what the social norms are for this area. I gotta learn them. During this time, the two individuals I saw on my passenger side mirror walking into the parking lot of the bank. We're in a city. Their foot traffic is fairly normal. During this time, I was able to observe the individuals walking on the left side of the vehicle, my driver's side mirror, where they were substantially closer. At this point, I could very easily determine that these individuals were not circling around to the front of the bank. They appeared to be becoming between our armored vehicle and the drive-thru of the bank. Foot traffic does not usually do business through a drive-thru. This is unusual behavior. Both individuals also had masks on and hands in the front of their hoodie pockets. It is January. That's not necessarily unheard of, and this is immediately after COVID, so masks were semi-normal at the time. However, the moment the body language shifted into an aggressive movement, I did what my partner and I discussed to do, and he was able to adequately respond. The suspects in the event did fire first, and my partner returned fire as well, and at this point both of the individuals fled the scene. Now, my point is with this story, had I not been vigilant, had I not been cued in on some of these things, even in the moment of unknown, it could have been very easily a completely different story. For example, I'm in an armored car company in an area I don't know. I could have just as easily been looking down at this phone, swiping through Facebook or going through Google Maps, and I would have missed all of those social cues. So in this video, we're going to go over how to detect bad guys in public. And disclaimer before we get there, this is not going to be a politically correct conversation. This is going to be an offensive conversation, and I don't care. It's very important to separate how you feel from the reality of the world. This is one of those cases where you need to do just that in order to stay alive. Welcome back, lead instructor of the Espionage with Spear Training Group. So a little bit of background here. I'm a security professional, been in the industry for a very long time. I take a lot of training courses, and I have over 30 different certifications and training modules of different things. I keep an entire library of various documentation. I get trained by the state and certified through several states at this point to perform this type of training. What we're going to be discussing today is threat deterrence, or identification rather. Now, a huge thing that we need to understand here, there is not a single indicator of what a threat is, okay? You can't just pick somebody by race, ethnicity, gender identity, politics, religious beliefs, or whatever. Maybe they wore the wrong shirt, or God forbid they were in the wrong flag and the wrong side of the hood. Just because they do these things does not mean that they are going to be a threat. However, all of these things can be indicative of a broader picture. As I already mentioned, this is not going to be a politically correct conversation, but it is a very necessary one in order to stay alive. So let's go over first identifying what a threat is. Now, most of this we're going to be looking under the guise of as a private citizen. or a security professional. Maybe you're protecting some location, whatever the case is. These are indicators that you can look out for in the public area to identify if someone's a threat. I have to specify that because if you are trespassing onto someone else's private property, that's a completely different environment. If you are military serving overseas, that is a completely different environment. If you are some super secret squirrel in a foreign country and you need to identify a tail, some of this is going to be relevant to you, but it is still a completely different environment. So we are going to be looking under this under the guise of citizenry and security professionals here within the United States. So what is a threat? Now, that sounds kind of indicative, right? That's someone that wants to hurt you. Okay, well, we don't know that they want to hurt us yet, right? So let's see how we can identify those factors using data and information prior to that person actually becoming a threat. So there are three major factors that we need to look into whenever it comes to identifying a threat. First and foremost is capability. Capability is just the means to act. Are they capable of performing something that you might determine as being threat? Number two is intent. Do they have the intention to? They may announce it, they may not. They may say, I'm going to get you, or give me your wallet, or tell me where you live, whatever the case is. They may or may not always mention it, but intent can be interpreted in different ways, such as body positioning, for example. If I square my shoulders up with you, my intent is with you, not deviating away or around you. Last thing we're going to look into is opportunity. Does the opportunity exist? Do I have a means to present myself as a threat? Maybe a weapon or no witnesses or whatever advantage that I'm seeking as a bad guy, can I get that? So again, we're looking at capability, intent, and opportunity. Now, whenever we're looking at threat models, considering like APT or the security frameworks and stuff, we're trying to establish something before the information exists. This is one of the critical things that is not considered very politically correct, right? If someone doesn't act, you can't necessarily treat them differently, right? Okay, well, there's a difference between treating somebody differently and preparing to treat them differently. You can't just make a judgment call per se and start harassing somebody in a JCPenney's because they looked at you for longer than 4 seconds. You certainly can, but now we are doing the opposite of threat deterrence. Now we might be engaging with that threat. So there are a lot of different things here. But point being, we're going to be identifying these mostly through security frameworks and our APTs and stuff like that. So, number two, our second factor here is going to be looking for indications that somebody is legitimately a threat. Now, as I've already stated, and I can't state this enough, there is no one singular attributing action to someone being a threat. It is a collection of variables and information that you have to be capable of collecting that is going to allow you to identify a threat. So in a few different pieces of literature, I'll pop them up here, there are various indicators that can be determined. For example, some of the most broad ones that are going to work universally wherever you are going to be related to target glancing or repeated glancing around. These are the individuals that are just really looking all around, okay? Now, if someone is comfortable in their environment, they're not necessarily going to be looking all the way around. They're comfortable. They don't need to know where exits are or where law enforcement or cameras and things like that are. So, rapid, accelerated glancing or excessive awareness could be an indicator of something going on. Similarly, we have unnatural loitering. People just hanging out in areas that are not particularly common. That can be concerning. Excessive attention to security, just infrastructure, be it security guards, cameras, or locks on doors. If they are constantly glancing at a security professional, that could be an indicator that they're looking for a window or an opening or an opportunity to do something. And that may not necessarily involve the security team themselves. That might actually be they're looking for a window to act on somebody else. They just don't want the security to observe it. We also have the unnecessary grooming or excessive grooming. Maybe they're constantly fiddling with their facial hair, constantly running their hands through their hand, tucking their shirt. People that carry guns, especially if you're new to carrying a weapon or uncomfortable with it, you're going to constantly kind of give it a little tap or a feel wherever that weapon is. I know whenever I first started carrying my weapon, I used to constantly check it with my wrist. I'd just constantly tap it. Don't know why, but it was just something I had to kind of grow out of. And it's a very common thing for a huge amount of people. The sudden change of pace or positioning. If someone's walking down a hallway and then all of a sudden they rapidly change with no stutter, that could be indicative of an odd behavior. That's something you need to pay attention to. Maybe they're positioning themselves for something or to avoid something. These are common indicators. Now, all of those things that I just listed, they are indicative of the environment. If I just said unnatural loitering is a concerning factor, but you're also on Skid Row in LA, okay, well, unnatural loitering is a little bit normal there, right? So we got to put these things in perspective. Similarly related to rapid glancing and just constantly looking around. If you are in a methadone clinic, you're gonna have some people that are a little glancy. Okay, that's gonna be a normal behavior for the environment. So make sure to consider the environment that you're in whenever you are assessing a potential threat. Now, interestingly, we like to believe that well-lit areas are safer. Statistically, though, it's a little bit hard to prove. We can find some data that says a well-lit parking lot is safer than a non-well-lit parking lot. But we can also simultaneously find well-lit neighborhoods that are constantly hit with burglaries, whereas rural neighborhoods with next to no lighting are almost never hit. So it's very hard to say whether or not lighting in and of itself is indicative of threat behaviors and environmental factors. But it can be a totality of circumstances. If you have an individual who's constantly seeking to stay in a shadowed area, that could be indicative of a threat behavior. Similarly, disruption of the normal pattern. Now, in order to know what disruption of a normal pattern looks like, you have to know what the fuck the normal pattern is in the environment. If it is normal in a shopping mall for everybody to walk along the right or walk with the flow of traffic on the right and against the traffic on the left, you would pick up on somebody who's intentionally going against the grain. Or if your work environment is only accessible to people who work in that area, maybe you're a private office building, you would be very aware of somebody just strolling through the parking lot and not coming in the building, right? That would be an unusual behavior. Now, the biggest critical factor that you can have on threat indication is understanding what the norm is for your environment. If you grew up in the hood, you likely have some street smarts. You understand when a road is not safe to go down. And you understand that due to various indicators of maybe these guys are collected on the corner and they're watching all of the vehicles that come up. Maybe that's a thing in your particular hood. Or maybe at the shopping mall or the local gas station, people just hanging out outside. That's okay and normal until they start hanging out in a particular part of that gas station area. Because you grow up in that environment, you understand what some of those threat indicators are. In my particular case, such as the story earlier, I was new to San Antonio. I did not know these factors. Luckily, I met up with a huge amount of awesome people in that environment who were able to explain what some of the norms are for some of the areas, such as where I lived at the time. And on these routes, they were able to explain what the norms are and what is not normal, and they were able to help me identify those things very quickly. However, if you grew up in a much more ritzy kind of part of town, hey, kudos to you with your charcuterie board and everything. That's fine and dandy, but you also, well, whenever we look at the numbers on this particular factor, people who grew up on the higher end of the income standards and everything like that, Generally, these individuals are less capable of identifying environmental variables than people who grew up on the lower end. That's why we call it street smarts. So, why do some people fall victim to crimes whenever they go to areas they shouldn't be in really to begin with? Because they don't understand those threat indicators that the people that grew up on the streets or in the hoods do understand, and they're able to identify those things. And so understanding what is normal for the environment and flowing into that normal is hugely important. To go off into another little bit of a story here, this was actually out of a book on espionage and counterintelligence. This is specifically about counterintelligence and counter-surveillance stuff. There was a operative who was in a Middle Eastern country. She's female. And in this particular country, females could be outside without their male counterpart, but they were expected to go directly to and from wherever it was they were going. They needed to mind their business, things like that. There was a little bit of a societal clash here, but point being, they could go to and from and uncovered faces and everything. While this female operative was moving to her place of work, she noticed a tail behind her of 3 to 4 younger men. As she observed this tail, she noticed that she was able to make a couple of turns and deviations that most people generally wouldn't do in this environment, and they still stuck with her. This is a great indicator that they were there for her. Now, she knows at this point that she can't deviate into an isolated area because these guys will take advantage of her, be it for aggressive means or other means, whatever the case is. The point is to avoid the confrontation, not to get into the confrontation. Her being able to identify the behavior and confirm the behavior now pushes her into an area where she needs to deviate or break contact with these subjects. She was able to do this, I believe, by going through a department store and going through a back emergency exit, which generally you don't want to do. That's not a Tuesday morning kind of thing, but if you got people tailing you, it's better to do that than shoot them in the face. So the big thing here, make sure to, whenever you're building these profiles on a potential threat, make sure you are doing this based off of legitimate, real, observable, and verifiable information. The more you actually do this in public and practice it, the better you will get at it. Make sure that you are not building this story in your head about this potential threat based off of your own biases and interpretations. You can't just look at a Mexican dude and be like, oh, that dude's a threat because he's Mexican. No, that's not how that works, okay? You need to understand the difference between legitimacy and a potential internal bias that you may have. Now, let's move on to how to establish that baseline. Now, we're going to kind of prioritize this through those counterintelligence, counter-surveillance techniques, and CPTD techniques and things like that to identify what the norm is for the environment. This should only take you about 30 to 60 seconds every time you move into a new area. So let's discuss how that might look. But first, understand this. Whenever you're driving to and from work, what do you actually remember? Do you remember the people that merged over into you, the turns you needed to take, thinking about where to stop? If you're like most statistical Americans, you probably drove about 20 minutes to work in a around 10,000 to less than 10,000 pound vehicle, and you probably don't remember anything. It was just you on autopilot driving 8,000 pound vehicle at 70 miles an hour. That's pretty bad. You should remember more. So why don't we do that? Well, it's very easy for us to switch into that autopilot mode. And that is what we're going to be combating against. Whenever you go shopping at Walmart or the mall or wherever it is that you go with your family, are you actually looking at people, or are you in that same autopilot mode that got you to that parking lot? So let's talk about the things to look into and observe to become a better, more aware individual so that you can actually identify a threat. So most importantly here is going to be the general movement patterns and the noise pattern. Now, I have a lot of hearing loss, so it's a little weird for me to detect noise, but movement and how people are moving. Are they going quickly? Are they going the same direction? Is everybody all scattered out? What is the norm for the other people in this environment? Now, sure, they might be just as lost as you are, but understanding the baseline of everybody else in there will at least tell you what you need to do to blend into the crowd. Similarly, we need to look into our lighting and the general visibility of the area and the environment. Some environments you want to be in the light, some areas you don't want to be. What are the people there doing? Take a look at the social interactions. Are people actually nodding at each other? Are they waving at each other? Are they familiar with each other? Or is everybody avoiding eye contact? When people walk by you, are they looking at you? Or are they just minding their own business as if you're not there? And how are people flowing in and out of the exits of the area? Are they just swooping on by each other, or are they taking up the entire space? Observing for all of these things will let you establish what the norm is for the environment. Now, one thing that's going to be a little bit harder for you to observe is what the dress code is normally like. If you're stepping out in a three-piece suit to go to the shopping mall and get yourself some cafe food, you're going to look a little out of place. You're going to draw attention into yourself, and that is generally not the best thing to do if you're trying to avoid a threat. So here's where we're going to get into another critical thing that is not politically correct. Be aware of what you are wearing and how you're dressed. So the whole hashtag #MeToo thing, sure, by all means, you have the freedom to do what you want. And hey, I am an absolutionist with freedom. You do whatever you want as long as no one else is getting hurt. However, you need to understand, if you are wearing something that is not appropriate for the environment you are in, you should expect attention. Yes, you have the freedom to do it, but you need to understand that that is not normal for the environment that you're in. If you decide to wear something super sexy and seductive in the Middle East, you're probably going to get hauled off to one of the worst prison experiences you could ever have. While simultaneously, if I'm out in the Alaska frontier in my birthday suit, I'm absolutely going to get some looks. But I should expect that. That's a choice I made that is not normal for the environment. I shouldn't be surprised by that. While simultaneously not being surprised about that, you need to understand the attention that your suit, or lack therein, is going to bring to you. And you can't be offended whenever you get that type of attention. We are identifying threats here, and then eventually we're going to get into threat avoidance. Identifying a threat is very important, but it's harder to do it when everybody is looking at you. And then escaping from a threat or deterring a threat is a lot harder whenever you're wearing something very odd and you already look a little bit mentally out of place. So, understand the norm for the environment, the movement of the environment, and the dress and the appropriate behavior of the environment. By all means, be a beautiful little butterfly and express yourself however you want. But you create a target whenever you are abnormal. Social cues are very important. If you don't understand social cues, you need to go talk to a psychiatrist. There's other things going on. So let's go into some of the cultural expectations for the environment that you might be in. Now, depending on where you are in the world or what city that you're in, cultural differences are going to exist. If you are traveling abroad, you should probably try to watch some videos about how to take a business card if you're going in Japan, or how much eye contact you should expect in the Middle East, or what kind of food is okay to eat for you and your foreign gut whenever you go visit Central America. Whatever the case is, you need to look into the cultural norms. That way you're not going out and just offending people left and right and creating a scenario where a threat is going to find you. So some of this is going to be in the sense of personal space norms. Where I come from, in Arkansas, we have big personal space bubbles. And my wife and I had a bit of culture shock whenever we moved to San Antonio, as those personal space bubbles are a little bit smaller than what we were familiar with. We didn't learn it until we went shopping. And that is not the best place to learn. But you can look into that. You can observe that before you actually go into those environments. And you can see that, therefore expecting what is normal for your environment. Similarly, we have eye contact expectations and noise levels. It is not okay to be loud as fuck in a movie theater. Pretty much for anybody. But if you're in a cultural environment where everybody is like that, you're probably not going to get too mad that you laugh your fucking ass off in a comedy movie, right? Similarly with eye contact, say Middle Eastern cultures, for example. If there's someone who is a immigrant or native to a Middle Eastern culture, staring is not frowned upon for them. Whereas most Americans, we only hold the stare for about 3 to 4 seconds or so. And then we will deviate, look around, not make it too awkward. Anything more than that is much more intense and should be concerned. But we have a lot of other indicators, such as facial inflection, body language with the stare, things like that. Some cultures do not have those social cues, so you're going to need to learn by observing what social cues are normal for your environment. You don't want to be staring somebody down if that is going to get you in a fight. As we've already explained, make sure to be aware of your dress code and stuff. You won't always just be able to Google whether or not it's a white tablecloth type dinner or something, but use some generalizations. If you can go to Google and you can see the $3 signs on their little price expectation, you can assume that wearing a collar would not be a bad idea. Similarly, you can drop down and check out their reviews, and if they say something like, a very home-style kitchen, yeah, you're probably going to be okay in a t-shirt. Another thing to consider, while we're doing these cultural assessments, be aware of the area that you're in within the culture that you're in. If you are in the mountains of Tibet, the dress code and the expectations for everybody there are going to be completely different than a local airport that has all types of people just congregating together, just trying to get to their workflow. Consider the areas that you're in and the times of day that you're in as well. People who are traveling at night at a truck or gas station are probably going to be wearing some type of pajamas or comfortable wear, whereas somebody stopping at the local gas station outside of a neighborhood, heading into their urban job, it's going to be a bit different than what we just stated. The huge thing here is most crime prevention data shows that you just need to be aware of the context of the environment you're in. Anything you do to deviate from the local culture and environment draws attention to you. When you draw attention to yourself, you now have more potential threats looking at you that forces you to observe more people. That means you're more likely to break the cultural or the societal norm and therefore get the attention of a potential threat. Now we're going to look into one of the most critical and proven techniques for threat deterrence and mitigation, and that is the observation of gait. Now, let me build this story here for you a little bit. Once upon a time, we showed a bunch of violent criminals some video of people walking up and down the street. And we asked these guys, hey, who would you target and why? Almost universally, the convicts identified individuals on the extreme ends to be potential targets. For example, people who were walking excessively quickly down the street were identified as potentially nervous or potentially unaware because they're in a rush, whereas people walking excessively slowly were also identified as potentially nervous and potentially unaware because they're going so slow they're probably not paying that much attention. So somewhere in the middle of your movement speed is where you want to be to avoid that threat attention. How far do you walk with your legs apart? Stay in the middle for the same reason pretty much. How aware do you need to be? Stay in the middle. Not hypervigilant, but not aware. all of these factors, all of these reviews from these individuals go to show that staying about in the middle, regardless of other factors, is going to be the safest in most areas. Similarly, we can identify if someone is going to be a threat based off of those same potential factors. If you see someone walking excessively quickly or excessively slowly, not paying any attention or paying way too much attention, these are also indicators of unusual behavior. Again, it's not a single pill that just solves the problem, but it is a large indicator that someone has a potential to become a threat if they are on the extreme ends of those variables. So some of the main things that we're looking for whenever we're watching someone's gait or their movement is going to be related to their emotional state, their physical fitness or physical intentions, and their just intent in general. This is going to tell us a lot of these things. And some of it's going to be social cues. You're really only going to pick this up by doing it quite often and watching people. So what might that look like? Well, that can be purposeful or hesitant movement. That can be weight distribution. How do they shift from one side to the other? Is that shift necessary because of the size of the individual? Or is the person shifting their weight because they're trying to conceal something under their clothing? Again, maybe they're unconsciously touching. Target glancing while walking. They, walk them out of their own business, but they're going to constantly look up. One of the things we used to do in the armored car industry is whenever we noticed these individuals, we would give them a nod. Now, it's important to note, a downward nod in the United States is generally accepted to be, hey, I see you. I acknowledge you. That is a huge deterrence to would-be bad guys, because now they know that they are observed. I have a few stories related to that one, but people who are going to be a bad guy or a threat, they are not trying to be observed, and they don't want to be observed by several people. So if you're walking by, you see somebody kind of doing something weird, and you just go on about your day. I'm not glancing back at them over and over unless they're doing, something weird coming at me. But a simple glance, nod, go on about your day. That's about it. Maybe even a glance, nod, look at them a little bit, and then go on about your day. They know that they are seen now. You have collected information about them. One of the other things we want to look for is predatory type behaviors or interceptive movements. If I'm walking in a straight line up here and then someone else is coming in at an angle where they're going to intercept me, that would be an example of a predatory interception or a predatory movement. You can also see this whenever people are looking at you, but they're moving in parallel. These things can be a little bit indicative of things not going good, or if there are multiple actors, say one walking in parallel and another crossing. These can all be indicators. So that you're going to have to base that off of cultural norms and the norm of your environments. But it is something to be aware of. And you can see if your imitation or your movement gets mocked. For example, if you're walking in that straight line and someone's at an intercept angle, stop walking. Do they keep walking in their intercept angle, or do they deviate and come to you? Now let's take a look at learning. One of my favorite things to do is pull crime data for an area or an environment and show it to an individual. Whenever I do a security assessment for a site, I will pull crime data and show it to them so they understand what they're going up against and the potentials they're in. It can really be an eye-opening thing, and it's important to note most everywhere that has a police department or something like that, some type of jurisdiction, be it your sheriff, local PD, or agencies, whatever, they're going to have publicly accessible crime data. It's always going to have different forms, so whenever you look up San Antonio's crime data or Omaha, Nebraska's crime data, they're going to be completely different layouts with different boxes. But take the time, get to learn a little bit, and you'll be able to see what crime exists in what areas and what time frames. And this is a lot of good information to work with. If you and your significant other are looking to go out to dinner at some place you've never been and it's on a Friday night, look up the crime data for Friday nights in that area. That way you can know if you need to really prepare against car thieves or aggravated assaults or narcotics possession arrests. Like, what encounters are you going to have before you actually get there? This will give you an idea of what characteristics to look out for and what to avoid. So let's talk about the group mentality whenever it comes to defending yourself, your family, your friends, and the group mentality of others. Here's again where we're not going to get too politically correct. We're going to look at some data that is something you need to be aware of. If you are at a left-leaning protest, liberal protest or something like that, violence has a higher tendency in groups whenever it comes to left-leaning individuals. So if there are a group of left-leaning individuals who are agitated, you are in a higher potential danger than you would be if it was a group of right-wing protesters. Again, this is all statistical data that you can pull for yourself. This actually comes directly out of a threat analysis handbook, so it's the data. I don't care if you're mad about it. However, simultaneously, on the right-hand side, if you know that you're dealing with a right-wing individual, they are generally more violent when they are completely alone, as in a lone actor type event. And there are, I'm not going to do it here, it'd be way too much of a conversation, but there are certain parameters that can identify whether or not someone on the left or certainly on the right is going to be violent, but it's not always easy to notice that. Obviously, there can be certain indicators of somebody's political leaning. They're wearing a red MAGA hat, or they have the little rainbow pin thing or something, you know. You can generally assume the guy in the MAGA hat is going to be right-leaning, and the person with the rainbow pin is going to be left-leaning, right? Those are, again, your dress, right? How you're dressed is how you're judged. So understanding some of these political ideologies can help you determine whether or not you might be in potential danger. Some other indicators are, what is the group made up of? Say you're walking down the street, you see 5 individuals on the side of the street, and you don't know if they're going to be a threat or not. If it is 5 middle-aged males or younger males, there's a very high likelihood, compared to other group makeups, not saying just 5 males is dangerous, but if it's 5 younger to middle-aged males, you have a higher likelihood of being assaulted by them than if it's 4 younger middle-aged males and 1 child. If there's a child present, the likelihood of violence from that group drops so dramatically it may as well be ignored. What if it's a mixed group? 2 males, 2 females, both middle-aged. It's pretty low, especially when you compare to a group of all males. It's pretty low statistically, but it is not 0. A child being present makes it almost 0, but females being present in the group also reduces that factor too. You also do need to judge this again based off of culture, environment, the situation that you're in. If you're out on the party strip and everybody's drinking, judgment's not going to be very good. So some people may be ready to fight you, right? Point being, you can identify groups and their potential threat levels based off of some statistical anomalies, but as we've already stated, one confirmation or one statistical probabilities does not mean somebody is going to be a threat. It is a collection of things that make somebody a threat. So what can you do if you have your family in tow or your friends in tow? Ideally, you all train together and understand what you're going to do in a dynamic situation. Ideally, you talk to your spouse and what needs to happen if you say, go, right? But not always the case. You need to have that conversation ahead of time, but if you don't, hopefully they listen. The important note here, whenever you're moving with a group of people, you are moving only as fast as the slowest person in that group. Sure, you can abandon them and leave them for bear food.
What are you doing?
Taking off my shoes.
Why?
Because I run faster with those shoes.
You can't outrun that bear.
I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you.
But ideally, you don't want to do that, right? So your ability to protect yourself, your friends, your family really depends on the weakest link in that group. So some of the things that you can do are establish rally points and establish general first aid response or general response. For example, my wife is medical, we'll say. So I know that she has significantly more medical training than me. So something medical goes on, she's the primary responder. If there's something dangerous where a gun is needed or avoiding a conflict, I'm the primary responder to that. That's something we just know and understand. One general thing that you can do whenever you're moving with family or friends, the most vulnerable individuals need to be kept on the inside. This is very similar to when you're walking with your children. You don't let them just hang out on the traffic side. Or if you got like a mobility disabled person, you're not just letting them do their own thing, just keep up in the back where they're popping willies and shit. You can actually push them, be a decent human being. The more sensitive individuals, keep them closer to the group or inside that group perimeter. That can keep them from being snatched up if they're a small child or assaulted if they're a vulnerable individual. Generally speaking, whenever it comes to a threat targeting a group, they will try to do variable isolation, where they are going to isolate a family member or distract them away. And you can see this in a group mentality where the bad actors will distract the main group while simultaneously trying to coerce a small child from the group. We've seen, I won't go in detail on it, but we've seen that before a lot. You just need to make sure everybody's on the same page, and that even when you are verbally or visually engaging with somebody, you're still tracking where your hobbits are.
I'm going on an adventure!
So let's get into some threat deterrence stuff. Some things that you, as the individual, can do. Number one, just be a hard target. Again, as we've already stated, you're not going to the extremes here. You need to find your middle ground, and it needs to be appropriate for the environment that you're in. But you need to have a confident posture. Don't be slouching, looking at the ground, all sad face like a basset hound. Square up your shoulders, pull your shoulders back just a little bit, and walk confidently. Breathe, just like actually breathe. Don't just, somber on, like it's hard to breathe. Make sure you have awareness scanning as well. This is, again, I'm not hyper vigilant, but I'm looking with my eyes. I'm making eye contact. I'm giving nods where they're needed or gentle smiles. Again, I'm not trying to fight people. So smile. How you doing? Going on about your day. Just because I smile at you doesn't mean I need to talk to you. So don't get that mixed up in your social norms and stuff. And make sure that your movement is purposeful. You're there in public for a reason, theoretically. You intend to go that way, and you are going to go that way. One of the things we used to do on the armored car side is it was a very aggressive walk. I can't really simulate it right here in my office, but it's basically I am going that direction, and anybody between me in that direction is either going to move or I am going to move them. Now, that does not mean I'm going in and just shoving Granny Smith to the fucking ground, but that does mean that I'm making my movement very known as I am walking up. You walk with a certain intensity that garners attention. Not necessarily appropriate for civilian everyday life, but if you are a security professional, walk with intent and severity. Now, I'm not going to go too in-depth in this. I've already gone over this in a use of force video that I made. But if, for whatever reason, you've done all these techniques and still somebody comes to engage with you, you must try to de-escalate first. I have a gun everywhere I go. Maybe even on some of those. Nah, I don't carry a gun where I shouldn't. That would be very irresponsible. Anyway, I have a gun wherever I'm going. Everywhere I go, there's a potential for that situation to be lethal. I don't want it to be lethal at all if I can avoid it. So, if I engage with somebody, I am trying my best to not shoot them in the face. And we are going to do avoidance. Hey, I'm sorry it felt that way. Let's go this own way. Whatever. If you got to take the joke on yourself, take the joke yourself. If we both walk away, even if they're murmuring things to themselves, you didn't have to shoot them. So that's pretty cool. Just try to disengage, de-escalate the situation if you can. Use soft tones. Be considerate of the other individual. You don't know what they're going through. Maybe it's an acid trip. We don't know. Do not let your ego get involved. Don't beat your chest, whatever. Doesn't matter if you got your lady with you. She's with you at the end of the day, not that person, right? And if she wants to leave you for someone that's aggressive, probably not meant to be. Point being, it's more important to go home at the end of the day than it is to have to hurt somebody else or get people hurt. That is the goal at the end of it all. To sum it all up, we're going to go into the OODA loop. There are some updated philosophies to this whole thing. Point being, it's a great just analogy for the things to do. Observe, orient, decide, and act. So an observation, that is literally just looking around. What do you see? If you can't see things, then you can't even start to do the next step. So start observing the environment around you, and now you can actually acquire that information and use it to make decisions and actions. From here, we need to go into orient. This is going to be establishing what the base is. You see something, is that the normal for the environment that you're in? Are you doing the normal thing? Are they doing the normal thing? Is there something abnormal about this? Orienting on what the norm is. Next, we're going to have decide. What are you going to do about that? What are you going to do about that perfectly normal behavior? If it's normal, you shouldn't do anything. What are you going to do about that very unusual behavior? Well, I'm going to try to avoid it because it doesn't involve me. What are you going to do about that behavior that is coming directly at you? Well, I'm going to try to de-escalate it. So we have to decide what we are going to do about it. And the last thing is act. Actually doing it. Now, don't get me wrong, you can absolutely change your mind in the middle of the action. But the bad guy always gets a choice too. And more than likely, the bad guy has already worked through the OODA loop before you have. So he already has the advantage. You need to be quick. What we have learned from the OODA loop, whenever it actually became a thing, is whoever works that faster is likely to be the most successful. Point being with all of this, understand the baseline. Understand if you are within that baseline. And understand what to do if things are going awry. Your observation skills, your ability to absorb the environment and pick up on context clues or social cues and be able to communicate effectively if things aren't going great is going to be incredibly important. The only way to get better at this stuff is to actually go out and do it. Now, one way you can do this is go out in public with someone that's a homie of yours, ideally if it's busy, and see if you guys can more or less play tag in a way. See if you can identify that individual as they're walking up through you through the crowd, or if you are able to walk up to them through the crowd, and see how suspicious you both look. Obviously, be cognizant of the environment you're in. Security professionals are going to see two people doing weird shit, especially if you're all dressed out in like tactical shit or something. You read the room a little bit. Security professionals are going to cue in on weird behaviors. So the more weird you're being while you're doing these exercises or whatever it is, the more attention you're going to get. And that is the opposite of what you should be doing here. So, by all means, get creative, get out there, start observing people, understand what the norm is for your environment, and see how well you can blend in with it. Talk with people. Actually legitimately conversate with people. Whenever I first moved to San Antonio, I would not have known the amount of danger I was in sometimes had I not talked to some of the people that knew those environments and what the norms were. So go talk to these people. Go find out how other people live and how they experience life and what's normal for them. And hopefully they can talk to you about the same thing. And we all grow as better human beings by the end of it. This is all I have with just situational awareness and growing as a human and being better out there and keeping us all safe. By all means, drop your stories below. I'd love to go into some of my other stories at another time, and we'll have a grand old little time. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Be safe.